Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology, only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. This is Eric Dreiman, host of the Hooks and Hoses podcast. I want to welcome you to the May edition of Hooks and Hoses. Very happy to have Anthony Rowett as my guest this evening. Uh, I'll let Anthony introduce himself and tell us about himself, but he's certainly no stranger to podcasts. You know, he has his own podcast that he does for fire engineering, the Generation Engine podcast, and certainly a well-known instructor uh, and presenter around the country. So, Anthony, welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend an hour here with us this evening, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'd like the audience to know about what you do for a living. So,
All right. Well, first, appreciate you having me on and on
yeah.
your podcast. But like you said, I do a podcast, Generation Engine for Fire Engineering with Todd Edwards. I'm a captain with the Mobile Fire Rescue Department in Mobile, Alabama. Originally started as a volunteer for 3 years in northern New Jersey, in a rural area of New Jersey before that, and spent kind of my whole career in the downtown area. And then started getting out. How I met you, teaching around the country, different departments, different conferences, FDIC, things like that. So kind of all over the place, but it's a good thing because you get to know a lot of people and have a lot of people to bounce ideas off of, not just within your own department all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to get outside your comfort zone and what you know is your normal, because that's you spend all your time in your own organization, you kind of get pigeonholed into one thought process and one mindset. So yeah, I had the fortunate opportunity to teach with Anthony in Hastings, Nebraska, which is in the middle of the Corn Belt. Well removed from both of our normal domiciles where we work on a day-to-day basis, but it was a good experience, and I'm happy I had the opportunity to spend a few days with Anthony and get to know him a little better. So, Anthony, we're going to talk. The bulk of the conversation tonight. The topic is standpipe operations, but I'm going to throw a question out at you just to begin with. What do you think the American Fire Service is getting right with engine company operations, and what do you think we still kind of lack or could be doing better at with our engine company operations?
I think, and a lot of my perspective being, my job, and then when I travel, so seeing the trainings that are going on, um, but the focus on the skill sets, the actual hands-on ability to move lines, to flow water, to stretch lines effectively. Um, you can talk about it all day long, but if you can't do it with your skill sets, with your hands, you're not very effective. So the fact that there's a very big focus in the trainings going on around the country, I think that also shows that within the departments, it's the same thing. And that the mindset is on the actual skill, being able to effectively stretch a line, flow and move, understand the water application and all that. But the hands-on skill set is what's really being focused on, because we can't talk a fire out. We got to be able to do it. So the fact that we're not focusing on just the books or just talking about it, but that there is a huge push and a huge emphasis on the hands-on skill set, I think that's where we're really getting it right, because that's where everything comes down to. That's going to be make or break. Yeah, I think the weakness that we still have is, and I see it as an excuse a lot of times, is the way it's used, is just that we pulled the wrong line because we didn't have enough people. We've got to pick a line that's going to win that fight. Don't pull the small line and just say I didn't have enough people. Pick the line that's going to win and then staff it accordingly. So I tell people all the time, I get not every my world isn't everybody's world. I have no delay in a second engine. They're right on top of us, but you're not going alone. Other people are coming. Get a second engine on that line and commit to the line that's going to win. If you have to, pull a 2.5 and get a quick hit on it, and then move in with inch and three quarter if you don't have a lot of people. But don't set yourself up to lose. Set yourself up to win. I think that goes back to the focus that is on the 2.5, or on the hands-on skill set translates to that too, and that's how we're starting to win that battle. But it's still a battle. is when people are emphasizing the hands-on skill, they're also getting more comfortable with the bigger line, which is allowing them to translate that to selecting that line at a fire. Uh, so I think that plays out. It's still something we've got to deal with, but I think that's kind of the weakness that's being overcome. And I think it's twofold. It's the decision making, but it's also the comfortability that comes with doing the hands-on skill set that's making people more comfortable to start choosing those bigger lines when they need to. So it kind of goes back to where our strength is in my mind too, is that that's how we're overcoming it, but it is still something we need to overcome.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think my I've always I didn't always appreciate how good a job the engine crews do at their job until I got into my current role as battalion chief, and I started to realize that the world doesn't revolve around the truck company. That the engine company is actually the ones that put out the fire, and I started to delve into it a lot more. But I think my experience, particularly before I got some time on the job and had some experience, on the fire ground and those sorts of things, was you think, well, each engine has to pull their own line, and I've come to revisit that, and obviously, the environments that we work in provide for this, but just because the first line that gets pulled doesn't mean that the second engine that pulls up has to pull a second line. The second engine can be assigned to help the first engine get their line in service, particularly if you're pulling a big line. If you're stretching a 2.5 or you're stretching a yard lay in order to get to a garden apartment or a big deep setback or commercial occupancy, it might take the first couple of engines just to get that first line in operation, and that's okay. If it takes, if you've got 2 3 man engine companies and it takes 4 people to get the first line in operation, and the third engine actually is the company that starts to deploy the backup line, that's okay because the backup line's useless if the attack line's not in position, right? I think you would agree with that.
Yeah, you got to focus on that first line. That's what's going to win. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I threw that question out initially. I told you I was going to ask you that in the pre-show, but let's kind of transition into standpipe operations. Let's talk about the more straightforward operation, which would be a multi-story building with a pre-pipe standpipe in place. What's your philosophy? How would you address? Let's say you're obviously you are a captain on an engine company, but you had some new guys coming into your company, and you said, "Hey, we do our fair amount of standpipe operations. Here's some things I think that you should know. Here's some things that might be misconceptions or mistruths in the American Fire Service about standpipe operations that you might lay out to a new crew that you were training up or presenting the topic to."
So, and this is my personal experience. One of the biggest things we had to overcome was addressing how you pump a system. Because everyone reads the IFSTA book, and then this number's stuck in their head like it's a magic number, and it's just 150, and that's just not hydraulics. When you get above about the 10th floor, that number's not working anymore. So that's one of the first things we do, and not just with our drivers, because we have a lot of firefighters move up and drive. They swing drive, we call it, when our drivers are off. So everybody's always really, because we run that area, they're always talking about how to pump these systems if they have to, and we don't pump them automatically. We're set up with an engine at the hydrant, an engine at the FTC. They're connected to each other. They're moving water and then just dumping it with dry lines going into the FTC. And then if we call and the chief makes the decision to charge the system, then they charge it. But we leave dry lines into the system until that call is made by the chief. We let the fire pump do its thing, unless it doesn't. But as we go over how to figure out, how to pump the system, we had a big overhaul of our entire books on high-rise operations in the past 3 years. We actually went away from deeming it high-rise operations in our SOGs and just made it standpipe operations. So the because of the things that were in that OG of how we staff lines, what lines have to be used, all this kind of stuff, we just deemed it as these are the things that have to happen if you're operating from the system. These are the things that can be done if you're operating from the rig. And it doesn't really matter if the building's 2 stories tall or 40. Our decisions a lot of times were being made by, are you operating off the system or off the rig? So we deemed it that way of how we were going to write our OGs outside of the dispatch stuff. But from the operational side, it was really about the system. Are you using it or are you using the rig? Uh, So, and then we go into that. Our biggest focus is always on the hose packs and understanding how to stretch them. Go back to what I said earlier. If you can't do it hands on, then you're going to fail. So we focus on that part, especially with, like you said, you get newer guys in the company. They're not going to be the one making the decision. I just need you to be able to stretch the line, know where you fit in, know your role, and know what you got to do. So we really focus on that part, and then we start developing people into the decision making aspect of it. But the biggest thing we really focus on is those two: is how to stretch our packs, whether we're doing a 3-pack system, whether we're adding a pack, if we have to go longer, how to do all those, how to do the stretches, how to stretch it dry, how to stretch it wet, and then how to pump a system if we have to. And that's where we've kind of overcome and got a lot of people operating on the same page now versus everyone's kind of in their own world. We did a better job with the new version of this OG that came out in this 3-year process to get people on the same page. There's no more, this company does it this way. Well, this officer likes this. It's very blatantly stated, you will do this in the books. And then one of the final things we did is we finished it last year. The new OGs came out, new equipment came out, all this kind of stuff. And the pumping of the FDC was kind of the final stage. We got some high pressure hose that's used only for pumping the systems, things like that. And we actually went around and placarded every building that has to be pumped above 150 for the top floor. So that if you had someone detailed in, doesn't know the area, 2 o'clock in the morning, they can't think of how to figure their math up. At least they can go to that and they know they can pump to the top floor with adequate pressure. So it's in the newer NFPA standards, and we just don't have buildings that are new enough to have that signage. So the city just opted to do it themselves as a precautionary take towards those buildings because it's something we don't do every day. You do a house fire, not that it's easy, but and not that it's routine, but your decision making falls within patterns you're used to. And then the high rise, it's a whole different pattern you have to follow. So that was one thing to make sure that if we did have to pump the system, if they weren't getting water, they could look at that sign and know if it's them or it's the system. Because if they're just not pumping a high enough pressure, they could achieve that very easily by looking at the sign. So we just made it very simple with the sign. If there's no sign, 150 pumps the top floor above the churn pressure of the pump. If it's above 150, it's placarded on a sign that says fire pump pressure and a number. So we try to simplify it as much as we can because we felt like an internal look at our department, that was the weakest link. Because it is something that not only are these fires not every day, that's the part of the operation we don't do every time either. We're going to hook up to the system, we're going to stretch the line, but we get in place. We don't actually pump the pressure into the system every time unless the pump fails. So that was our weakest link, just out of doing it the least amount of time. So we were able to put a kind of a safety in place to make sure that whoever's driving is able to at least have something to fall back on to make sure they can achieve it.
So you're relying. I want to make sure I understood you correctly. In your organization, when you go to if you go to a working high-rise fire, you're going to your default is we're going to let the fire pump do its job, and only if the fire pump fails do we augment that with our pumping apparatus.
Yeah, so we let the system do its thing. If it doesn't, we are already ready. There's water moving. It's just being dumped by that pumper sitting at the FDC, and they already got lines hooked into the system. So they just got to close the drains and open the lines going into the system. So when we wrote the OG, it was very much modeled toward the New York City Fire Department and the Houston Fire Department. We use New York City's high-rise packs. So from the outlet forward, we are very similar, if not identical, to how New York City stretches those packs because we use the same packs. But we supply the system very, very similar to Houston.
Okay, interesting. That's a little bit different thought process than I'm used to. So I appreciate that insight.
Two comes
So
from, we have no gravity tanks on our buildings or anything like that. All of our systems are supplied by municipal water. So that's where a lot of that thought process comes from.
no, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's that's I applaud you. That's interesting. It's just something that I'm not familiar with in the system that I work in. Um, Certainly something worth looking into a little more because that's different than we do business. So when I assume you're using 2.5 for your standpipe operations and
We
not two and a
use
quarter.
two and a quarter now.
Two and a
They made
quarter
that
now.
move, about 3 years ago. They moved to two and a quarter.
Okay. And why was that decision made? Was it simply for maneuverability? Was it weight? Was it a combination of different things?
And weight was a big part of it. They put a group of about, I think it was 12 or 16 people together that had a vote on this committee that tried out different options, and that's what they selected. Our target flow was always 265. So even when we were using 2.5, and what we were overcoming was we had the east side of the city, which deals with the taller buildings, using 2.5, and we had the west side of the city that rarely deals with the taller buildings, using 1 3/4 because they were using it more towards their courtyard lays and things like that. And we needed to get uniformity across the city. So when they made the move that everyone's going to be doing the same thing, they came up with parameters that that group had to kind of accomplish, and they had minimum flows at minimum pressures that they still wanted to reach, and they had a target flow rate that they wanted to be able to reach under normal to better than normal conditions. So ultimately, their goal was 1 1/8 inch flowing correctly up to 265, but 250 was their number to match the NFPA standard. So that still achieved it, but having that roughly 8 to 10 less gallons of water per 100 feet in the hose makes a big difference on weight that you do have to drag across the floor. And we've lost a decent amount of staffing over the years. I've been here coming up on 16 years, and we went from every truck always riding 4 to a lot of them riding 3. I mean, luckily for me, we're the last company in the city to ride short. We ride with 4 all the time, almost because of the high rise, because we're also first due to the port and still one of the busier companies in the city. So we get to keep that staffing, but the people coming to help us don't. A lot of times they're riding 3. So that maneuverability of the lighter weight in the hose while still achieving that flow rate what was kind of the final deciding factor, and guys really liked it. I think some of it goes back to when I said like the weakness is the 2.5 and understanding how to move it and stuff like that. A lot of people just have bad experiences with it too. I know when I came in, you're in the academy, they put a 100 psi fog nozzle on the end of it and they pump it and they say, let's see if the guy can hold on, But that impact that's going to last through your career until someone shows you how to fix it. Uh, so I think there still was negativity mindset wise towards 2.5 that led towards that decision as well from a just a bias standpoint, as well as being able to choose the something that still flowed what they wanted, and then the maneuverability of it because it was a lot lighter weight when charged than the 2.5.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm a fan of 2 1/4. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but everybody that I've talked to, I haven't had the opportunity to handle one myself. But we've done some studies. When I was in the training division, we piloted a program to do some assessments, and it was well received. We're still in the process of deciding which direction we're going to go. We currently carry 2.5, but we ordered enough 2 1/4 to outfit all of our engines with it. So when you say you've switched to 2 1/4, is that just for uh, big line operations, or and you're still carrying 1 3/4 for your standard residential fires, or you're just carrying 2 1/4 across the board for everything?
No, so in the hose beds we have 1 3/4 and 2.5, and then every company has their 3 high rise packs of 2 1/4. And then what we do is by SOG, if you hook up to a standpipe, you have to have 2 engines. And typically they get their own truck doing their forcible entry if it's commercial, popping the ceiling tiles, things like that. But everyone brings their stuff. So we get when we get to the standpipe outlet, we have 2 engine companies, so 5, 6, 7 people depending on staffing. Uh, and then we have 6 hose packs and 2 bags. So
50-foot sections, I assume.
yeah, we use 50 feet.
Yeah, 'cause I know some organizations use 100-foot sections, but it's not the norm. But I always like to ask because
75
some
footers
people
are
do.
becoming pretty popular because I did this station for our FDIC hands-on class this year and taught the standpipe stretch. And a lot of people were telling me they're using 75s because of riding 3 people, and it was the way they could carry 150 feet up with 2 people. Uh, if we're riding short for us, it's just one guy's got to carry 2 packs, and one guy has to carry a pack and a bag. But we stayed in 3 foot or 3 50-foot sections.
Okay, excellent. What are you carrying in your high-rise bags?
So
What
ours
is the standard?
are, and there's a couple companies that have a variable in here, and it's just because of the port. So I'll tell you what's in there, but most people you don't have to worry about those things. But it is something that we carry in our bags, and I'll tell you why we do factor it into being important in our bag. But we carry the Elkhart standard bag, so the elbow with the bleed bleeder, the gate, and the gauge. And then we have spanner wrenches in there. We have wood door chalks in there. We strongly believe that if you carry door chalks in your gear to a house fire or a regular apartment fire, that you should still have those chalks when you get to the door of the apartment. You shouldn't be using them to get out of the stairwell. So the bag's equipped to take care of all of that. So the bag has door chalks in it to get you out of the stairs. Um, and then we carry all the PRV adjustment tools. So we don't have anything to restrict what PRVs, pressure reducing valves, can be in our city. I know like some departments, Denver, Columbus, Ohio, have done that where it's restricted down to make it easier on the fire department to recognize it, to adjust it. We don't have that, so we have to be prepared for all of them. So we carry 3/8" steel rods. We carry an 18-inch pipe wrench. We carry T25 anti-tamper torque keys. Um, and we carry a 1 1/16 deep well socket on a ratchet wrench, and that allows us to adjust all the valves. And we also carry a 1.5 to 2.5 inch increaser, because one of the things with a standpipe we have to always think about is the fact that you have to plan for how you're going to overcome a short stretch. As much as we say we shouldn't do it, you still have to know how you're going to overcome it if it happens. Like, that's not something to figure out in the smoke in that hallway. So our department, the option is that's been pre-selected is we extend off the tip of the nozzle. So we'll back out, close the door, but we're not going to shut the system down at the outlet to take the length off at the outlet, add a length in there, and recharge it. Because now you got to rebleed the whole system. If I just extend it off the tip of the nozzle, I don't have to rebleed the line. So that's a big deal. Because of the fact with the standpipe, it's not just the regular bleed it like a house fire, because someone's got to set a pressure. And you got to remember that standpipe, it's not someone sitting at a pump panel that knows what to pump it at. That fire pump's on or off. It can be very, very hot sometimes, higher than we need, and it might throw you across the room. So we want to do that one time and not have to redo a setting of pressure and all that. So we extend off the tip. But because when you take that tip off of that smoothbore nozzle, it's going to be 1.5 inch threads. We have to have that increaser so we can hook up that 2.25 with 1/2 inch couplings. And then what's special that we have in our bags is we have some adapters for the ships. Um, some different. We don't always carry our international shore connection in the bag because it's heavy. That's kind of just sits next to it. We grab it if we go to a ship. But we do have just some regular, male, double female type adapters that are different threads that are local on ships when they're being worked on and stuff like that, that the shipyards have asked us to carry. Only certain companies have those, but the reason we always mention that they're in our bags is we do put an emphasis on the weight of the bag. Uh, when we did the fast wrench study, and that's still out on if they're going to buy it or not, that was a big part of the study, was at least for the companies carrying the extra equipment for the ships, it made the bag the same weight as the bags that didn't have that equipment, but had the standard allotment of all those separate tools for adjusting pressure reducing valves. So that's why we do make kind of the differentiation of which companies have those extra tools. Is we might, if they don't go fast wrenches for the whole department, try to get them at least for those companies to keep the bag weights the same. And as much as that sounds funny, the matter of 2 or 3 pounds, if you got to climb a lot of stairs, I mean, it you recognize it very, very quick.
Absolutely, it makes a big difference. We're doing some training in my battalion right now at a vacant 9-story apartment building that we have the opportunity to train in. And yeah, I mean, every ounce, you don't think about it until you're the guy hauling it, but every ounce, every pound makes a huge difference, particularly when you got all your gear on and everything else. So yeah, anything we can do to lighten those bags is great. I may have missed it when you were going through the list of items that you carry, but do you carry an inline gauge?
Yes, yeah, we carry the standard kit from Elkhart, so it's got the
Okay.
leader on the elbow, and then it's got the inline gauge and the gate valve.
Okay. And the gate valve, is it just a straight gate valve straight through, or is it
Yep.
doesn't have a split
Nope.
connections or anything like
We
that?
allow a gated Y in our standpipe operation. Each outlet
Okay.
is
Very good.
on. So if we hooked up, if the fire was on 10, we hooked up on 9. When they hook up the backup line, they'll hook up on 8 and just add one more length than we used. And what they'll do is they'll hook up directly to that outlet, put that one extra length in play, and then at the same location on 9 where we hooked up the first line, they'll put their elbow, their gate, and their inline gauge right there, and then put the rest of the lengths off of it. So one person can control the pressures of both lines.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great teaching point right there, because a lot of people don't think about that. They say, well, we're going to hook up on the floor below. We're going to put our inline gauge in, and then the attack line's on the, or 2 floors below, and then the attack line's on the floor below, and then you've got 20 feet between your inline gauges, and you've got people running back. Either you got to dedicate 2 people, or one guy's may as well have wore his jogging shoes instead of his bunker pants, because he's going to be going back and forth. So that's a great point. I appreciate that. That's something I'll take back and use, for some stuff here in Indianapolis going forward. You mentioned pressure reducing valves a little bit, and I'd be lying if I said that I was an expert on them. Those have always kind of been my bailiwick, if I have one, when it comes to high rise operations, just because it seems like there's so many different pressure reducing valves, so many different configurations, adjustment styles, and all that sort of stuff. Do you have any tips for the audience as far as uh, resources to get better educated on it, or tips that you've experienced over your career? Kind of default, if you had to condense it down to a Cliff Notes version, things that you would pass along to the audience about dealing with those.
Yeah. So, on a recognition standpoint, um, first, I mean, anyone can reach out to me. I'll send you a Google Drive links with videos of each one, how to adjust them, and then you'll know them. But what we do is make your medicals about fires. I mean, I'm not being funny, but none of us signed up here to go to medical runs, and might not sound good, but we're gonna do our job there. Walk down the stairs, or at least go in them once in a while. You might not go all the way down, but go down a couple flights, see what valves you have, see where they are. Not all stairwells are going to have pipes in them. Are they in the hallway? Are they in the stairs? If all of you talk about that all the time on game day, at least one person is going to remember something. So you'll remember where they are. And what we'll do is we'll walk. If we see them, we'll stop. Hey, which valve is this? A quick discussion on it, and it's a reminder for everybody. Hey, that's a PRV or it's not. Or what kind is it? How do we adjust it? And then also what you start doing is we'll walk, especially if we know that building, and okay, which floor does it change, right? Because the PRV's only got to be in the system where there's 175 pounds of pressure at that location of the outlet. So you might have PRVs from the ground floor to the ninth floor, but 10 through 15 doesn't have them. They have standard valves. That's a good thing to know because it changes how that driver's going to pump the system. So that's a big thing for us too. Is if we just say we're hooking up on 9, well, the driver knows we're hooked up to a standard valve, so he knows how to do his math. If we say we're hooked up on 9 and it has a pressure reducing valve, we're going to say that because now it changed how he pumps the system and he figures out his hydraulics. So, but if he already knows that off the jump of it, because we talk about it all the time when you're in those buildings, that's a big help too. We also like to say it that we're hooking up to one for the fact of the chief heard it. Hopefully everybody heard it. So if you do get tunnel visioned and we don't have enough pressure, and the driver's just sitting there trying to overcome because he's pumping his system and you're saying you don't have enough, maybe someone else walks up and says, hey man, maybe it's the valve. You're doing your part, maybe it's the valve, and we just got a little tunnel vision. It's just another safety for us. But for us, the biggest thing is just to talk about them. Get in the stairwells, look at the outlets, point it out and say what it is and talk about how to adjust it. So it's a common thing of just recognition so that people know what they're looking at. And that's the big thing for us is just I want you to be able to walk and you see it. You walk, you point it out. As soon as you see it, you know what it looks like. You know what you're dealing with. Like I said, I can send videos to anybody so they can refresh on them, learn them. I've got them saved all the time. I give them out after every class. Um, but the other thing we like to do is the factory preset valve because we can't adjust it, right? All the field adjustable valves, at least we can take some action, hopefully, to adjust that valve and get it if it is wrong and it's not giving us enough pressure, we can do something to fix it. The factory preset is what it is. If it was installed wrong, it's wrong and we can't do anything about it. So I don't want that to be a late in the game figuring out that, hey, Cap, we don't have enough pressure. This is a factory preset valve, and now we're all trying to overcome that. So if we're walking up the stairs and they see a factory preset valve, you're going to hear a bunch of people call it out in the stairs. And we say it because the one we deal with the most is the Elkhart factory preset. The Elkhart IRFA is also the most common PRV we run into. It's just, I guess, what's common in the city. But the Elkhart factory preset PRV, the bonnet is extruded off the valve. The valve is very big, We have some of the Zerns that they look just like it, but without that big extruded bonnet. But anytime you're walking up the stairs in Mobile and you hear big bonnet, big problems, they're telling you, they're recognizing it and telling everybody in the stairwell, we have factory preset valves. Everybody's already thinking about plan B and everybody already knows what that is. So it's just getting people on the same page so they're not being as reactive if something goes wrong and trying to figure out the problem. And if they say that, I already know if they say, hey, Cap, we got a pressure problem, I don't have to tell them what to do. They already know plan B and they're already working on it when they told me. So uh, we like to do that too. So it's a recognition thing on medical calls whenever you're in the buildings. But if we're on a fire alarm, we're on a fire, if we're walking up the stairs and we see that one, you're going to hear it called out by everybody in the stairs. Just making sure everybody's on the same page, knowing, hey, if we have a pressure problem, this isn't one we can adjust.
Okay, so with the presets, what is your plan B? How do you overcome that challenge of having the presets you can't adjust?
So if we run
Yep.
to a factory preset and it's not giving us enough pressure, our next move is to shut that outlet down, add another length of hose to that line, and drop down another floor below and hook up to that one.
Okay.
That one was wrong. For the most part, we start looking at, can we get vertical in this building with a rope stretch or some sort of way to
Okay.
find just going vertical, because if two valves were wrong, we're really getting behind the eight ball timing wise if we're just going to check and see if the third one. So, and this is all just
Okay.
a prevention thing. We haven't really run into problems of those valves being set wrong. It's just the historical
Mhm.
factor of what has happened that we like to be very prepared of our guys knowing how to overcome this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You like to think that a mechanical device is going to work when you need it, but you never know when it might fail, or you might get jammed up. So it's always
We always
good to have those
remember
plan Bs in
the
place.
weakest link in that system is the guy that installed it, right? I mean, the valve
Yeah.
will do what it's designed to do, but if it gets installed on the wrong outlet, the wrong location of the system, it's designed to be on 3 and he puts it on 33. Well, it's going to open this much and it needs to open this much. The valve wasn't the problem, it was the human error. So that's what we're always planning for, is that human error that came into that equation.
Yeah. Well, very good. Yeah, it's good information, and I'm gonna be emailing you to get that Google Drive link or whatever you call it. So I cover a downtown district, so we got more high rise than we got fingers. So move on, and you mentioned it a little bit with whether you're going to do a rope drop or going vertical. Basically, is what you said, and so for those of us who work in areas that have standpipe buildings, that's great. Standpipes are worth their weight in gold if they're working properly and they aren't clogged up and the valves work and everything else. But there's certainly plenty of us who work in areas that maybe don't have standpipes. They work in an area that's really old, buildings that were built pre-standpipe requirements. So what are some mindset changes or thought process changes, tactic changes that have to take place, besides the obvious of knowing where those buildings are in your first due or second due area? But from a deployment standpoint, what are some things that you think it's important to be thinking about when you're dealing with a building that might be 8, 10 stories tall and it doesn't have a standpipe?
So for
And
us,
you got a fire.
we do deal with it for the most part. So many of our buildings are renovated and retrofitted now, but I do have one that we know it's going to be bad. There's been fires in it before, and it doesn't have a standpipe, 6-story tenement, and I mean it's a walk up, and we're just going to have to deal with it. But we already know what we're going to do. It's going to be a rope stretch for us, and that's the move we're going to make. But for us, I think it starts with understanding that when you get vertical and you get that hose hanging this way, it doesn't just save hose from wrapping stairs and used less. It saves people. It saves a lot of time. And when you look at a building, whether it has a standpipe or not, if it was on that lower floor and you can maybe do a well stretch, maybe do a rope stretch, maybe those are considerations you're taking before you use the standpipe, because we don't have control over the standpipe very well. We can say fire prevention does. That's going to be dependent on how well your city enforces codes and all that kind of stuff. So I don't have that lack of control when I stretch it off my rig and I go with a rope stretch or a well stretch. So if we can go through the well hole in the stairwell, that space between the railings of the stairs, and get vertical as we walk up them, that's a win. We're doing that most times anyway. we're going to use our standpipes when we're at height. And that's kind of when we're going to use them is at height, and we have to. If we don't have to use it, we're not going to. We're going to stretch from the rig. We have more control. I have a driver with a brain at the pump. It's not a fire pump that's on or off. He can adjust pressure as needed. He's checked the rig that day, make sure the pump works. We've tested that hose. We just have a lot more control. So if we can, we're going to do that. But if you don't have them, you have to. And I think honestly, in talks I've had with a lot of people, it comes down to preference, and a lot of times it gets seen as like, oh, are you a rope stretch guy or a coupling drop guy? It's got to go by what your department's good at. My department is better at a rope stretch. We just are. We're better with ropes. I don't know if it's because of our history. We've used them longer than we would have attempted coupling drops, so we're better at it. But we're better at it with rope. We're also more versatile with the rope. We can go higher than we are comfortable doing a coupling drop. So we're just better with our ropes, so we prefer ropes. So if we're going to go vertical, our number one move is the well hole. Get the thing hanging vertically in the stairwell just as we walk up the stairs. That's the win. If not, we go to a rope stretch most times. And we're going to go up. We used to, tie the rope off and throw the bag out the window. They tie a knot and send it up. What we've done now is we put the bag between our feet, and there's a carabiner on the end of the rope, and we lower the carabiner. This way, when we get the hose back up, one, it wasn't a knot. They could just clip it on the bail and send it up. But once we get it back, we've got our rope bag if we need it for something else. So that was something the department changed to about a year ago. And now you didn't have to repack a bag or anything. It was all right there if you needed it again. It wasn't hanging all the way to the ground out the window. But those are our two kind of go-tos is a well stretch first, then a rope. If it's on a second or third floor on an open air balcony, we'll do hook stretches, but that's about the only time you'll see us do that. We stop at the third floor because at the fourth floor, we run out of people. We like our officers to be doing recon, so they're not involved in that passing of the hook from floor to floor. So we've got a driver on the ground, our plug guys on the second floor, the nozzle man's on the third floor. They're passing it up. Well, now that set guy on the second floor be running to the fourth floor to get it again. We're quicker with our ropes, and we've trained on it and just seen we're faster with a rope than doing that. So that's the better move for us. And like I said, we will do coupling drops. It's just we're better with ropes, so that's typically where we go. I've only done one coupling drop at an actual fire in my career. We prefer our ropes. So, and even that one, I mean, it was just things just kind of fell a weird way. So we had hose up with us, and we were going to have to move some rigs. So that became the move was we'll just lower this down, hook it up to a 2.5, and that would be the move. Had we not had everything gone to plan, we probably would have done it a different way. It's just not the move for us. And I always tell people it's not that I'm against the coupling drop. If you're good at a coupling drop, good. It's the same thing. Don't get tied up into that. Do what's best for you. We are personally just better with our rope stretches than our coupling drops. So that's what we divert to is we divert to what we're good at. And because that's what's going to pay off for the citizen is we get water in the line to them quickest. And we're quicker with our ropes than almost anything. So that's where we kind of go to is the well hole, then the rope. If something's out of play, we go to something else. But for most times, we're going to well stretch it or we're going to rope stretch it.
Yeah. At what point, at what height do you get concerned about uh, the weight of the charged hose line, not being able to support itself? So, in other words, where you need to maybe secure it, or the return on investment isn't what you want it to be.
Yeah. So as far as securing it, we tie it off every time, no matter what. We don't care how high we take it up. We do tie it off. I know some people don't based on lower floors and how much hose is on the floor. We just do it for take out the lowest common denominator. No one has to sit there and have that question in their mind. Am I supposed to tie this off? Am I not? Just tie it off and be done with it. So we do that. But as far as the weight thing, I mean, I've had this discussion with Bill Gustin, and they did some crazy studies down in Miami-Dade on how many floors they can take it vertically, and the couplings held the weight. We tie it off every time. We still try to secure it about every 4 floors if we had to, but we go 6 or 7 floors for the most part, and then above that we're at height and we're going to use the standpipe for the most part. We've got a few buildings we'll go a little taller. Um, it's just knowing the building. We don't necessarily trust the system, um, and we have one building that it, it's such a problem. I mean, it's a half a block from the bay and Hurricane Central, and the fire pumps in a non-waterproof vault in the sidewalk. So it looks like it rusted in 1980 and it's still sitting there. So we have no faith that it'll ever run. So we know we have to stretch that building. It's 12 stories. So we just have a plan for that building, but we wouldn't necessarily always vertically stretch 12 stories either. That's just because that building, we consider it a no standpipe building. We know the system's not going to operate till they get it fixed, and that's in the process, and it's a lawsuit and all that. So, but most parts, we're like that 6, 7 floor range is kind of our line where we start. Okay, you're kind of at the end of this. We'll get into the standpipe. That's kind of our fallback to as a just a rule of thumb for us.
Mhm. So you say you get into the standpipe, but what if you have a building that's that tall and it doesn't have a standpipe?
Yeah, so
So you go on the stairwell stretch then, or
we
you gonna keep your fingers crossed and hold your tongue just right and do vertical, or what?
for those we will still, like I said, our outside of that 112 story, which does have a standpipe, we just know it's out of service. All of ours have been retrofitted to where our tallest non-standpipe buildings are 6 stories. But like that 12 story, we'll well hole stretch that building. We're just going to put some tie offs every 4 or 5 floors and just help support that
All right, very good. And I think it's worth pointing out, that every 4 or 5 floor tie off, because I know the questions come up in conversations that I've had. Everybody wants to know, well, how many floors of hose can I hang off the side of a building, or should I bring it in? There's different philosophies. You bring it in every 3 floors and take it down the hallway and take it back out the window, and all this kind of stuff. And then my experience has been the more complex you make it, the more opportunities you have for error or mix-ups or problems. So um, yeah, I wish there was a magic number that we could all default to and say you got to tie it off here, or you don't have to tie it off there, and there's so many feet and all that. But it's certainly for people who don't do this is on a day-to-day basis, which most people don't. But if it's something that you're not as familiar with, it's certainly worth researching, having the conversation, reaching out to Anthony or somebody else who has experience with it, because there's a lot more to it than I'll be the first to admit that I kind of took it for granted. Well, it's a high rise fire, big deal. We're going to have to standpipe and we're going to stretch down the hallway and spray water, right? That's what the engine does. It's that simple. It's just on off. What is there more to know about an engine company, right? And I've since figured out that that's not the case. But so when you guys are supplying this line, are you using 2.5 or 3 inch?
So we
What's your
if we do a well stretch or anything vertical, for the most part, it comes off our bulk bed. So our bulk beds are 500 feet, uh, and hopefully we'll go to a little bit longer bulk bed now with our new rigs. We just had a lot of old rigs that had tall beds, so that was kind of the most that could fit. It's 300 feet of 2.5 to a bell reducer to 200 feet of inch and 3/4. Uh, we kind of always wished it was the other way around, 300 feet of inch and 3/4 to 200 feet of 2.5. It was done that way for simplicity of pumping. Is that's a pre-connect sitting on top, pump that just like a pre-connect, and then just count the lengths of 2 inch. So it just made a very simple pumping operation. Is how we ended up with the bulk bed we have. Maybe it could be a little bit better as far as having a little bit more inch and 3/4 for maneuverability, but still for the most part for us, that 200 feet of inch and 3/4 on a lot of what we do is the stuff that's moving, and the 2.5 is stationary once we charge it on a lot of fires. I mean, sometimes it isn't, but so it doesn't really factor in all the time. But yeah, if we do that, it is 2.5 supplying an inch and 3/4. And if we just made the decision, hey, we're going all 2.5, then we would, do that vertical stretch with all 2.5. But for the most part, that's what we do. Our kind of rule of thumb is if you don't have signs of wind driven, it's not in the public hallway, you can take inch and 3/4 on it. It's still just the apartment, inch and 3/4 is still a go for us.
All right. So your supply lines are all 2.5 or 5 inch. I assume you get 5 inch as well. No 3 inch.
Yep, 2.5
Okay.
and 5 inch. We used to have 3 inch. Probably 10 years ago, it went away. Simplicity of ordering, less numbers, less sizes of lines, and now you look at where we're at now. We have inch and 3/4, we have 5 inch, we have 2.5, we have 7 trucks that are considered high rise specialty companies, so they have high pressure 2.5 for supplying FDCs, and then every rig has 3 lengths of 2.25. So you know we got away from 3 lengths, 3 different sizes to we're at 5 different things we have to order now. So the same idea
Yeah.
just didn't work out.
Okay. And why do you carry 3 lengths of hose or 3 hose bundles for your high-rise operations because that's pretty standard as far as your stretches go, or is it based on manpower, or how did you? Because we carry 4,
Yeah,
so
it's
that's why I'm asking.
our
We carry
standard.
4, so
150 feet's always been our standard pack. Um, we have some buildings that will exceed that, but it's always been we'll take our 150 because we marry the 2 companies and they all carry their stuff up. So we always have 300 feet of hose based on standard. Based on standard, if the building's built to standard, um, even in a sprinkler building hooking up on the floor below, you should be within 250 feet of a standpipe outlet. So that always gives us enough plus one extra if we had to drop down to the floor below for that second line. So that's kind of where that thought process has come from, and it's been that way since before I got on the job, and we just kept it that way when we wrote our books or rewrote our books, I should say.
yeah. Well, it's very good, and you make a good point because if you're truly doing high-rise operations and you want to say that you're prepared for a high-rise operation, you've got to come to the decision and admit to yourself that it's going to take those first 2 engine companies to get that line in operation. To ask 3, let alone 2 firefighters to completely deploy that line the way that we're supposed to deploy it, floor below, take your slack up the stairs to the floor above, or however you flake it out. That's just an impossible task. You know, definitely for 2, even for 3 people. So having that extra engine company there, not only do you have the extra personnel, but you've got the extra equipment if you need it. So
Yeah,
that's
even
that's a good point.
thing to point out too is even if you get good at stretching it, I mean, we use the New York packs. Even with all their staffing, that's a 3-pack system it's designed to be deployed by 2 people. We can deploy it and get it in place in 2 people, but once you put water in and gotta move it. So you can do that training every day and it's a thought like, "Oh, we've got it. We got it with our staffing." You're gonna need those extra people once you put water in it and you open that door. So just don't get in that habit of the stretch goes well with few people. You're gonna need it once you put water in it more than just stretching it. But once you put water in that big line, and these buildings aren't they're not built to be friendly to you. They're block and concrete buildings. They are hot. They're an oven. So once you're up there, you're gonna want the people to make this line move in there and make that go away. So put the staffing on it. Like I said, for us, it is in writing in our books. The minute we hook up to a standpipe system, it's got to be 2 engines on every single line. They got to have that gives us guaranteed enough hose, but it staffs the line from the outlet to the nozzle with enough people to move it, make it around the turns, and also to make sure the officer is in a supervisory role. That was a big point of it too. Was a lot of times we go to house fires now, the officer ends up having to be the backup guy. Or hey, I need staff back. The officer's got to go get it because they're riding short. These are fires you don't do every day. That's not good in your shotgun house bungalow fire. It's definitely not what you want to fire. A lot of people don't have experience with. That officer's being paid to be in charge and supervise. We made sure with our staffing by putting 2 engines together that one of those bosses is at the nozzle man's shoulder in a supervisory position, overseeing the operation of the nozzle.
Excellent. That takes me to my next question. You kind of led me into it. Do you have predetermined assignments like you automatically assign a firefighter to be the heel man or the firefighter at the landing doorway? Obviously you probably have somebody assigned to man the standpipe valve, those sorts of things. But
We do it.
do you have those,
We do it.
and what are they, and why do you have
Yeah, we do. It rotates because of staffing. If you're riding 4 or 3, but
them?
so the first in company's going to get up there. If the second in company's still coming up, they're going to start hooking those lines up. As long as the estimate of the stretch is going to be within 3 lengths, they'll get everything hooked up, the system bled, and get everything started. If they start moving the hose as far as the stretch, the nozzle and the backup are going to make that move, and then because we would have the person most times, someone's going to stay at the outlet, or you're leaving the outlet because second due is already up there with you. They're going to ultimately our second engine leaves somebody at the outlet. We might momentarily, but they get relieved, and our crew stays intact. Um, and then the second engine handles the outlet. So we rarely leave somebody there. We may if we just had to, but most times if they were that delayed, we wouldn't even start that stretch unless it was a stairwell stretch and we were going to charge it in the stairs. So but we wouldn't go out in the hallway with them that far behind us because we're not allowed to charge the line yet. So, but if it was in the stairs, we'd leave it because they're going to come up and they're going to be the one to charge it. So they would staff that position, and then their officer, their nozzle firefighter would fill in on that line as far as different door positions and keeping that line moving. My backup person would back up. My nozzle man would be the nozzle, and I'd be in a supervisory role if I was first to. Is how we kind of fill it out.
Okay. Very good. That's, yeah, appreciate that. So I know we talked a little bit about your engineers earlier, but is there any sort of special training that your your engineers that operate in your high rise areas get, or that you as a company officer, any special conversations or discussions that you have with your engineers, the guys driving the apparatus as far as pumping or not pumping and things that you want them to do?
So we have a tactical training unit. It's kind of modeled after New York's on a smaller scale of getting things done throughout the whole department. We're not as big as you guys, but still getting 500 guys, different topics that aren't just whatever someone came up with. This way, there was uniformity across the city at least every quarter. That falls on us. I'm a part of it to do it, and that's one of the topics we typically cover at least once a year is the standpipe operation. Sometimes it's been just the stretching aspect. This year when we did it, we had an emphasis on those drivers. So we took crews away and had different stations. So we broke it up, and part of it was too the smaller groups. If we got you to where it was just 4 or 5 people, we can make sure everybody did the drill. Nobody sat back and acted like they already did it. Everybody had to put their hands on it. And then so there was a station on how to dry stretch, do the apartment stretch. There was a station on how to wet stretch and stretch it in the stairs. And then there was a station on how to pump the system. And they had two engines. One would go to the hydrant, one would position at the FDC. They would put out the high pressure hoses. We used ropes to secure those hoses in place so that if they did rupture, the couplings are captured. They deploy those out, and then they would generate some pressure into our FDC and our standpipe building. So that was how we addressed it this year for the tactical training unit. That wasn't department wide. That was the one that we have quarterlies for the department. That was an additional one just for those 7 companies that are deemed high rise specialty companies. So then the rest kind of falls into we use target solutions like everybody. And as much as I'm not a fan, one of our guys that he's the chief, the 2 chiefs that are over that tactical training unit. One of them, he's just really good with computers. The other one's just very supportive of finding ways to get it the best for us. So they gave us our own page on that tactical training or for the tactical training unit on Target Solutions, where if you go watch one of these training videos, it automatically logs your CU hour and all this, but it's 100% videos of how we operate for the city of Mobile. So there's how to set up this, to pump the FTC. There's how to generate the pressure, how to stretch the different lines we do, whether it's 200 feet, 150 feet, an apartment stretch, a stairwell stretch, how to build the packs. That's just the big, if you don't work in the high rise district, yours probably never comes off the rig. How to build it the right way and make sure the couplings are always lining up, things like that. So if you're not from our area, I know some people might use the videos like, hey man, go refresh on them videos. If you're not from at least the east side of the city for us and you get detailed to us, my guys in the morning before they clean the station, they're going to make sure you can stretch those high rise packs because that's where you're going to fall in the role for us today. You're going to get a copy of the riding sheet that's going to tell you exactly what your role is and what to carry. If we're first in, second in, third in, or on a high rise, and then what your role is in a cardiac arrest, and then I don't even have to do it. My guys are already taking care of it. Before I can get to you and try to go over it, they're going to have those 3 packs on the ground, making sure you know it because we just look at it that we're first due to about 85% of the high rises in the city. So we have to be the experts. Like we can't get it wrong. If we get that high rise wrong, it's not going to get right. Like we're going to set everything back and we're going to end up just doing the best we can, but we're not going to have a success. So we really take that and the ships to heart that they're ours. So our guys, if you come work with us and you're not normal to us, you're not a second or third due company that's dealing with us all the time and also deals with those buildings, that's going to be the first thing those guys do is make sure you're comfortable and you know where you fit in when we go to those buildings.
Well, that's that you kind of hit on one of my pet peeves or my personal things there. That's a topic for another day. But having those conversations early on in the shift, whether it's with you as the company officer or the senior man on your apparatus or whoever it is, that goes so far. And I preach this all the time, and I still have people look at me cross-eyed. But it's like the time to figure out what you're going to do is not when you're pulling up in front of the place with smoke pumping out of it, right? It's when you're sitting drinking coffee in the morning. Hey, if we're first to, here's what we're doing. If we're second, so on and so forth, as you mentioned. That that speaks volumes to, I think, so many firefighters and companies could solve so many of their problems if they just had those conversations in the morning, particularly whether they're regular guys or somebody coming in for just a shift. So, I appreciate that. It's a big deal with me. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's a big thing to me, and it shows because it was my mentors that were like that, and that's the way I think. And now my guys, that's the way they think. So half the time, by the time I go type up the riding list for the day and bring it down, they've already got a copy showing the detail guy where they're supposed to, what they're going to be riding, what tools they got to carry for first, second, or third due, what they got to get if we're RIT, where they fit in on a high rise, which medical bag is theirs if it's a cardiac arrest, if they're the head, the compressions or the AED. So hey, half the time, by the time I hand it to you, I'm just handing you a piece of paper because they've already dealt with it and they feel that strongly about it. So, and I tell people all the time, like when we do our podcast with Todd, he knows every one of my guys because they all go to conferences. But like I'm just blessed. I really am in who I work with. I've got 100% handpicked crew. That helps. But that you get those people and they all fit and they have the same beliefs about the job. Maybe they don't believe everything the same opinions, but their beliefs about the job and that mold well. So when it comes to stuff like that, you don't have to ask. They're already doing it. By the time you can, they're already doing it. They're not letting problems get to you. They're fixing it before it happens. So I'm just blessed in that standpoint. So
yeah, that's great. I applaud you for doing that because there's a lot of people that don't. So, probably certainly not enough people do what you do. So I appreciate that, and it speaks volumes to your character and your leadership ability and your experience. So, we're coming up on an hour here, and as I told Anthony in the pre-show, today is my 27th wedding anniversary. So I'm all dressed up, getting ready to take the wife out for supper. So I told him I wanted to keep it to around an hour. So that's what we're going to do this evening. So Anthony, I'll give the last word to you. Where can people find you? How can people get a hold of you if they want to have you come in and do a talk or teach a class or come to their conference or just visit your website? Tell the audience what they need to know.
yeah, you anywhere with Port City Fire Training on it. So Instagram, Facebook, online, or Port City Fire Training at gmail.com. You can reach out to me. Uh, me and Todd say it all the time for our show. We're both anal retentive about our emails. I'm OCD. I can't stand to see the number on my phone. So if you email me, it will get answered probably within a couple hours because I can't stand looking at my phone and seeing something. Uh, if you do have questions about those PRVs and you want those videos, just email me, portcityfiretraining at gmail.com. I keep it saved on my computer, just a list of those Google Drive links. I'll send them to you and you can download them and use them how you need. Uh, so, but
All right.
last thing
Awesome.
for me is thank you again for having me on your show and using up your time slot to talk to me.
Absolutely, man. It was a good conversation, and I learned a ton, and definitely got some things I'll take back to the engine companies that are in my battalion, and start those conversations with them. So I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Eric Dreiman, host of the Hooks and Hoses podcast. On behalf of Fire Engineering and the Fire Engineering Network, I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and be safe. And we'll see you in June. And thanks again to my guest tonight, Anthony Rowett. Anthony, take care.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.